Hi, I'm Scott Langley. We are breaking down a side of beef today into sub-primals. And we will start probably by going kind of over what primals are versus sub-primals. And we'll start off with this half of beef, which has been quartered. So you've got a forequarter and a hind quarter. And then it's been separated between the 12th and 13th rib. And you'll naturally see some things before we start to break this down further. So this is the flank steak of the animal. You've got your inside skirt, which lies on the other side. You've got your outside skirt, or your diaphragm, which is this piece right here that's attached to your hanging tender, or the pillar of the diaphragm. And we'll go ahead and pull these down and separate our forequarter from our hind quarter. Our hanging tender, we'll go ahead and separate this from our outside skirt. And you'll see this thick connective tissue right here. That's what actually allows you to breathe and keep the negative pressure in your body cavity. On your outside skirt, we'll pull that off next. This is your outside skirt with membranes on both sides. See that here. As well as on that side. Then we have our inside skirt, which we'll pull off next. This is what your inside skirt looks like, untrimmed. You'll notice on this one, there's only membrane on one side of this cut. So the next step, we'll actually separate our rib from our chuck, and that'll be made at the 5th and 6th rib, which will give us 7 full ribs on our 107 rib, which will be the next cut that we make. So on this, you'll see of our chuck, which is what this primal would actually be left. You've got your chuck eye, which is the mirror image of your rib eye, and then you'll see the start of your brisket, or your pectoral muscle, which is the remaining part of that. And that's all coming off of your chuck primal. Now we're going to actually cut through our ribs and the sternum to separate our brisket from the remaining forequarters. This is a true bone-in or a 119 brisket starting point, as far as it's really more of a 118. This would be the whole bone-in brisket. So you will have what's referred to as decal off, and I'll go ahead and pull that off, which is this fat seam right here that you're actually seaming out on the brisket, as well as the sternum bones itself. But that would be a starting point for a brisket. So this would be your typical close to 120 brisket. The remaining decal that I'm trying not to take too much of the lean. Make it point being this muscle and your flat being this muscle. For the next part, we're going to remove our chuck short ribs from the chuck itself. And on those, you typically see only 4 short ribs. And that's because this last one would just be lean. It would be bone without lean on it. And that is why we always cut off the 5th rib on a chuck short rib. Now we're going to pull off our pectoral muscle, or the reflection of our brisket. And this would be your uncleaned pectoral muscle, also sometimes known as special trim. Next, I'll separate our chuck from our shoulder clod, the shoulder of the animal. So I'm going to start by actually peeling off our rope meat. Next, we'll go ahead and remove the vertebral column. That would be our neck bones removed. So the next part that I'm going to remove is the ligamental nuchae, and you'll see it come all the way up on the neck. And that's what actually allows the cow to pop its neck up and its head so that it can tell if it's going to be consumed as far as low man on the food chain, also known as the paddywhack. You'll notice its elasticity. Then we'll pull off a little piece of cartilage. Then we'll trim off our shoulder rows, which is this muscle here. Next, we will separate our chuck flap, which is this muscle right here, from our chuck roll. So now we're going to actually pull off our shoulder blade bone, our chuck tender, which sits here, and our shoulder clod. But overall, this is the last step of our full chuck. And the cool part is you have your blade bone right here, or your paddle bone, and there's a ridge in this that separates your chuck tender from your top blade or flat iron, which is your number 2 most tender muscle in the carcass. And it's all coming off of the shoulder.
Alright, so what's that guy?
That is a chuck tender.
What
or
do we
a
use
Scotty
it for?
tender. So if you've ever had the really cheap fillets at a retail store, the 2 for $5, this is typically bacon wrapped and makes a nice little fillet with some enzymatic tenderizer. Now we're going to go ahead and pull off our blade bone and remove the rest of our shoulder clod, which is left with our foreshank and our blade bone. So we're going to pull off our subscapularis. So right below that is actually our flat iron or top blade, which is the whole muscle. Go ahead and pull off this. And right here you have your teres major, or your shoulder fillet. So that is your foreshank, and this would be your full cut clod with the teres major left on, your flat iron or top blade once you actually remove this seam of connective tissue down the center, and then you would have a clawed heart once I remove the teres major. And that would be our top blade seam right here. And your flat iron, if I come in here and cut out this big piece of connective tissue and separate that runs down the center, that's where you get your flat iron fillet. Now we are going to remove our rib from our plate, and we'll also cut our plate short rib out of this cut as well. So we're going to start by making a 3x4 cut, which is based off of the eye right here, and then 3 inches this way, and then 4 on the other side. Then our plate short rib will come off of right here, and it will have 3 ribs left on that. And if you look at the bones on this, they are wider and flatter on the one end. And there's only going to be 3 of them because that main muscle right here really tapers out, and you'd just be having bone and connective tissue on the 4th rib. So your rib, short rib, it's only 3 ribs. So this is our rib that is still attached and has not been chined. So the vertebral column currently is attached. So if I was to come in here with a knife, there's no way I can actually cut through that. So we're going to use the magic of the camera, and I'm going to chine this by hand, and all I'm trying to do is separate that vertebral column, and you'll see the finished product here in a second. And this will start our 107 rib preparation before we get that cut. So now that we have our 3x4 cut, the chine's been removed, and I can take my knife and cut down the center of that and separate off all these feather bones. The only thing that would be left to do before we'd make a 107 rib is to remove the remainder of this blade bone. And then what you would do is actually start breaking that down a little smaller. So this would be a 107 rib. I just took out the tip of the blade bone. And then what I'm going to do is make a 109E or export rib. So I'm going to remove the feather bones. And the last step will be to pull that yellow connective tissue, that ligamental nuchae that you saw in the chuck roll. This would be a 109E if we cut it down to a 2x2. So 2 inches on this side, 2 inches on that side, measuring from the eye. Currently it's a little longer than that. That'd be your 109E. So now we are removing the kidney knob. Now we're going to go ahead and start breaking down the hind quarter. We remove the kidney knob. We'll go ahead and pull off the flank steak of the animal next. And this would be our untrimmed flank that has not been peeled either. So once again, we'll have a membrane as well. So next we're going to go in and pull our sirloin flap meat. And it starts here, just right below the round, and continues to the 13th rib. On top of that, you had your inside skirt with the little remainder of it left here. And that is a untrimmed piece of sirloin flap meat. So now we're going to separate our full loin from our round complex. And we're separating that so that we can start breaking the carcass down further. So now you've got your top sirloin, you've got your bottom sirloin with the ball tip, and your tri-tip, which is right below that. You can maybe see it right there. Then we'll go ahead and start separating out our tenderloin from that, and then we'll cut off our sirloin. Now we're going to go ahead and remove the tenderloin, which sits along the inside of the animal. That would be your whole natural fall tenderloin. Now we're going to separate off of our full loin the short loin part of it, or the strip loin part of it, since we pulled the tenderloin out of this part. It's now going to be a bone-in shell strip loin if I was to chine and remove that vertebral column, and it'll leave us just our sirloin being connected. That would leave a shell strip that has been unchined, and you'll see your sirloin end on that. Now we're going to go ahead and separate our top and bottom sirloin. Then we will pull the hip bone off of this next. This would now be your top sirloin butt. That still has the mouse muscle left on. As well as the culotte, or the cap off the sirloin, which is this muscle right here. All together, that would be a full top sirloin, versus just this part that would be a center cut sirloin. So now we will separate our ball tip, or the reflection of our knuckle, from our tri-tip. That would be your tri-tip. This is what's left of the loin whenever it's been broken down and put into a lug. We're going to go ahead and start breaking down our round, which is the last primal that we have left. And we're going to pull off our knuckle. That'll be our starting point. That would be your rough knuckle. Next, we're going to start by pulling off our leftover hip bone or our H bone, and then we'll pull off our inside round or top round right here. And that is your inside round. We are now going to finish breaking down our round by creating a gooseneck round. We're just going to remove our femur bone and our hind shank. Now you've got your gooseneck round, your eye of round here, the heel muscle, and then your bottom round flat. And that is your eye of round and your bottom round.